What is up, everyone? Boschee here, back at it in Raid Shadow Legends, and today I wanted to talk to you guys about the champions included in the 10 times summoning event going on this weekend. But before we get into that, I did want to mention the champion concept contest that's been going on for a while now. So I'll go ahead and leave a link down below to the post on Facebook, but pretty much you can vote versus the top 3 on which champion you want to see in the game next. I definitely recommend you going over there and voting, but I also just recommend going over there in general and just checking out all the concept art that was submitted. I believe they have the top 10 on that post that they did, and honestly, we have a lot of talented people in the community, so it's really cool just to see the concepts that people came up with. But let's go ahead and jump into the 10 times. So this 10 times event is going to include a bunch of the new champions that were added into the game last week. So like I usually do with all 10 times, I definitely recommend you, taking into consideration where your account is progression wise, or if you're looking for a champion in a specific area like faction wars or a certain dungeon, and kind of basing it off of that. There have been a lot of reviews over some of these champions already, so I'll try to go over some of the issues that I think people found, or at least people have with some of these champions. But overall, I definitely recommend kind of just looking at your account and kind of not looking at those reviews and trying to see if it's going to help you in your account in general. So let's go ahead and just jump right in so we don't waste any time. So first off, we have some banner lords. So first one is Chancellor Yasmin, a support type banner lord, which is definitely a refresh of all the attack based champions in this game. So on the A1, attack one enemy, places an extra hit if they have no active buffs. Nothing too crazy there. On the A2, heal an ally by 40%, or it's going to be 60% of their max HP if you book it, or heals by a 80% instead if the ally has 50% HP or less. And you can drop this down to a 2-turn cooldown. Honestly, I think this is really good ability. On a 2-turn cooldown, you have a really big heal, so she can be a pocket healer, and also she's going to excel just by this ability. She's going to excel in faction wars to keep your people alive. On the A3, she has a 75% chance if you book it of removing all buffs from all allies, and then placing a sleep debuff for 1 turn on enemies who have active buffs. And you can drop this down to a 4-turn cooldown. So she can be used as a buff stripper, and then if that doesn't successfully work, you can CC a champion. Now do note that sleep is not the best CC because once hit, it breaks. But overall, I think this is a really cool ability and can be very useful, especially in things like faction wars. But yeah, and then has an aura of ally speed in all battles by 20%. So overall, I think she's a really good champion, just with her A2 being a direct big heal, and then the possibility of stripping buffs on the A3. When I look at the sleep debuff for 1 turn on all enemies with active debuffs, I don't think that's amazing, but it's a nice thing to have just in case the first part of the ability fails. I do know that on the AI, if you use her on auto, she does prioritize using the A3. In my head, this makes sense just because it's the longest cooldown skill that she has, so in order to be efficient, it's going to use the A3. A lot of people don't like that because obviously it's a waste of an ability, especially if she's going first or something like that. But overall, not too big of a deal. Like I said, I think she's going to do amazing in faction wars, but in general, if you just need a pocket healer of some kind, I definitely recommend going for her just because I think she's just going to do a really good job. She doesn't have that bad of base stats in general, and her speed is actually really good at 109. So overall, I think a really good champion if you're looking for a banner lord specifically, or a pocket healer specifically. The next one is Ursala the Mourner. I believe this is actually the only void champion in this 10 times event. So another support banner lord. Like I said, very welcome into the banner lord area. On the A1, attack one enemy has a 55% chance if you book it of decreasing target's turn meter by 10%. Never a bad thing to have turn meter manipulation on an A1. On the A2, attack all enemies has a 100% chance if you book it of placing a 50% decrease attack debuff for 2 turns, and then also places an increase attack buff on all your allies for 2 turns. Really cool ability. The decrease attack is always a welcome thing to help mitigate some of the damage, and the increase attack is just a nice cherry on top for the ability. And you can actually drop this down to a 3-turn cooldown, so you're gonna all like pretty much be able to keep decrease attack and increase attack up 100% of the time. And then on the A3, you have a revive all dead allies by 75% revive all dead allies with 75% HP, then fill their turn meter by 50%, and then also places an increased defense buff and a 25% strengthen buff on all allies for 3 turns. You can book this down to a 5-turn cooldown. Playing out one of the best reses in the game in my opinion. So most issues with reviving champions is that they are going to die soon after because they can't mitigate any damage afterwards. But with this revive, first off, you're reviving all your dead allies, you're putting their health to 75%, and you're giving an increased defense and a strengthen, which is going to, obviously help with taking damage, and that's for 3 turns. So typically, people that get revived soon after die unless they get a heal right away. This is just going to help them survive. Honestly, a ridiculous revive, definitely worthy of a Void Epic. And then you have the aura, increase ally speed in Doom Tower by in battles by 24%. Overall, not a bad aura. It is Doom Tower specific though. So yeah, overall, I think she is a ridiculously good champion, just because of the everything that she brings. She brings a crazy revive, a decrease attack, and a little bit of turn meter manipulation on the A1. But do know that she does have a lot of books. She has 5 books on the A1. She has 8 books on the A2. There is only 1 book on the A3, so I mean, if you're lucky, you can maybe get the book on the A3 off the first one. But overall, I think honestly she is worth getting. Especially since she's, I think, the only void in this batch of 10 times. But overall, if you're looking for a really good support champion in general, she definitely fits that bill. If you're looking for a revive that is ridiculous, like I said, I think she's just overall just a really good champion. She is built for Doom Tower just based off her aura. And I do think she can do very well on the waves, or even in some battles like Scarab King or Agrith the Nether Spider, just because of the revive. But overall, like I said, really, really good champion. Next champion is Armina from the Barbarians, a very CC heavy type champion, which is actually really cool. I actually really like this champion. I recently pulled her, but I haven't been able to play around and use her in some of the dungeons and stuff, so I'll definitely be looking at doing that. But anyways, let's go to abilities. So A1 has a 45% chance of booked, placing a stun debuff for 1 turn. CC on a A1 is always nice to have. A2, attack all enemies, has a 100% chance if booked of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns, and then steals 7.5% of the turn meter from targets under decreased defense. So first it's going to apply the decreased defense, and then it's going to look to steal turn meter. So you can steal a total, I believe, of 37.5% turn meter total on waves of 5 people. That's really cool, and you can get this down to a 3-turn cooldown. So honestly, really cool ability, very unique ability. Stealing turn meter is always better than just decreasing turn meter, just because that just means Armina is going to go a little bit quicker. On the A3, decrease turn meter of all enemies by 20%, and then has a 100% chance if you book it, placing a stun debuff for 1 turn on enemies who have their turn meters fully depleted. Once again, really cool, very heavy on the CC. This time you're only decreasing, not stealing the turn meter, but if you go like from the A2 and then going into the A3, you're stealing a lot of turn meter or decreasing a lot of turn meter. And then on the passive, fill the champion's turn meter by 10% each time an enemy receives a stun. Obviously this is going to benefit mostly from the A3, because if you can get a stun on 5 champions in a wave, you're going to gain 50% turn meter right off the bat from just her passive, and then obviously, you know, you're just going to go quicker. So overall, I think she's really, really cool. in the concept wise. I don't know how often you're going to use her stun. Obviously, these stuns are not useful on bosses, but the decreased defense is always a welcome thing for boss fights and for waves in general. But yeah, overall, I think she's going to do very well in faction wars just because most faction war floors are going to be wave based. I think she can help you get through waves and dungeons specifically, and possibly can do some work in Doom Tower. I just don't think, you'd want to bring her in Doom Tower compared to some of the other champions out there. But she can do some work, I believe. Once again, do note all the books that she takes. I think there's 5 books on the A3. Looks like 6 books on the A2, so 11, and then 4 books, so 15 books in total. All these new champions had a lot of books, guys, so do keep that in mind if you want to get the most out of these champions that you're looking to get. Overall, she is a really good champion. I don't know many places that she's going to do amazing in, but I do think she would excel in faction wars. Next, we have an Ogryn tribe by the name of Uugo. So Uugo, probably one of the best champions, I feel like, in the game. But yeah, let's go ahead and go through the kit. So on the A1, attack one enemy has a 35% chance of placing a leech debuff for 2 turns, and the chances increase by 5% for each enemy alive. This is obviously going to benefit based on, waves, because waves are going to include 5 people, which increases your chance by 25%, pushing this up to a 60% chance of applying that leech on waves. At least if you're doing a boss fight, it's always going to increase by 5%, which is pretty much like a sniper mastery built into some of these abilities, which is kind of cool. On the A2, attack all enemies has a 100% chance, if you book it, of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns, and also has a 75% chance, if booked, of placing a block buffs debuff for 2 turns. The chance of placing the block buffs debuff increases by 5% for each enemy alive. Once again, helps during the waves, but I wanted to mention, I read it wrong the very first time. I thought it was the decreased defense and block buffs for whatever reason. It is only the block buffs portion that gets that boosted chance for each enemy alive. But overall, I think it's a really cool ability. AoE drop defense is always a nice thing. The block buffs is just like the cherry on top. But yeah, overall, really, really cool ability. And yeah, overall, just really cool. On the A3, you have a remove all heals reduction debuff from all allies, then removes a random debuff from all allies, then heals all allies by 20% of this champion's max HP. And then the next part is the ridiculous part, or actually this whole ability is ridiculous. The next part, if all allies are dead, revives them with 50% HP and then fills their turn meter by 50% instead. And you can book the heal up and reduce this down to a 4-turn cooldown. I'll get back to this ability in just a second. And then the passive, Final Spite, place a 30% increased speed buff and a block damage buff on this champion for 1 turn whenever this champion's last living ally is killed. And this has a 5-turn cooldown. It can't be reduced from books. So back to the A3. So overall, I think this is the ability that makes this champion so crazy. So you pretty much have a small cleanse, because you're going to remove heal reduction, which, how often do you see that debuff? But it's going to remove 1 random debuff and then heal all allies for 20% of this champion's max HP. Obviously, you want to stack HP on this champion to make sure that Uugo's brew, or the A3, heals for a decent amount. But the fact that it's a cleanse and a heal, but can also be used as a res, is pretty crazy. The A3 combined with the passive of getting the increased speed and the block damage buff when her last ally dies, pretty much just guarantees, as long as the A3 is not on cooldown, you're going to get a revive on everyone. So this is actually very, very big in my opinion. I think she can do very well in dungeons in general, but obviously she's going to do very well on anything that includes waves, right? So the Doom Tower floors are actually going to do very well, just because there are a lot of Doom Tower floors that include block buffs, or that include a lot of buffs that you don't want to have on those champions, like the Siffy waves and stuff like that. So you can do the block buffs, which is really good. The leech is always a welcome thing, but this A3 is just going to be really key in just keeping everyone alive. And honestly, I think this is like an easy, I guess a key champion, I should say, in Faction Wars. Just because you're guaranteed to pretty much get off this A3, like I said, if it's not on cooldown. And it's reviving all dead allies, which is very key in Faction Crypts in order to get 3 stars. So yeah, I think very, very amazing champion in all honesty, especially for Faction Wars. I think in general that is where Uugo is going to excel, is Faction Wars, just because it has the revive all dead allies. It has the drop defense for the waves, the block buffs for the waves, which is very key on the Valkyrie waves. And then you have the leech that's just going to help keep people alive. Overall, an extremely good kit, just in general. But yeah, Faction Wars, I think this is easy mode if you get Uugo. And then has 102 speed, and a pretty decent base defense and HP. So overall, like I said, I don't know how many times, this is probably my favorite champion that was added, or one of my favorite champions that were added recently. Next we have a Lizardman, and that is a legendary actually, and it's going to be Roxam. So Roxam aesthetically is one of the best looking champions in the game in my opinion. Just looks super cool, and also I don't think you can tell from here, but has like a totem head on the back of his head, so really cool. Let's go through the kit though. So on the A1, and this kit is kind of long, so I'm going to try to go through as much as possible. Okay, so on the A1, Chroma Shift has a 50% chance, 60% chance if you book it, of filling this champion's turn meter by 10%. Also has a 60% chance if booked of placing a perfect veil buff on this champion for 1 turn if this attack is critical. So obviously, attack-based champion, you want to make sure that critical chance is up to 100%. That's definitely going to benefit you with this A1, but nothing too crazy. But applying perfect veil to this champion is actually pretty key, so do keep that in mind. On the A2, so you can get this down to a 3-turn cooldown. Attack one enemy, fills this champion's turn meter by 50%, and then has a 100% chance if you book it of placing a stun debuff on the target for 1 turn when attacking while under a veil or perfect veil. So obviously you want to be under perfect veil or veil in order to get that stun off. Has a 100% chance of placing a sleep debuff on the target for 1 turn when attacking without a veil or perfect veil. Obviously you want to go for the stun, so once again you want a veil or perfect veil, and then places a perfect veil buff on this champion for 2 turns after attacking without the veil or perfect veil. So pretty much you do want to aim to pair this champion with a champion that will put a veil or perfect veil. A really good option is Rector Drath, which was also recently added into the game. But yeah, so really cool concept, applying a lesser debuff that you don't really want if you're not under the veil, perfect veil. The stun is always a welcome thing, but yeah. And then on the A3 you have Flicker Step. This can go down to a 4-turn cooldown and has 2 different things, so under veil and not under veil pretty much. So while under veil, attacks all enemies and has a 100% chance of, if booked, of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff and a 25% weaken debuff. Decreases the cooldown of the jungle ambush skill by 2 turns, which is the A2. If you're not under perfect veil or veil, this only attacks 1 enemy, does the same exact thing but places a perfect veil on this champion after attacking, and that perfect veil lasts for 2 turns. So like I said, you want to pair this with someone that's going to put the veil on them, because you want this AoE, decrease defense and weaken, and to drop that cooldown of your A2 by 2 turns. Now I do know that he does prioritize the Flicker Step ability, so his A3, which is the issue that a lot of people had with it, because obviously you want to get this AoE decreased defense and weaken, but it does prioritize, and if you don't have that veil on him, he's only going to attack 1 enemy and then put himself under perfect veil. So that's the biggest thing, and then the fact that it reduces the cooldown, of your A2, but it doesn't prioritize A2, so it's a little bit wonky on the AI wise. But overall, I think a really cool champion in general. Really fits like the aesthetic of being like a chameleon, of like with the perfect veil, the veil. So in my book, it wins in the aesthetic and concept wise. I wish they did execute a little bit better on the AI wise of which abilities should be used. And then on the passive, places a block debuffs buff. Places a block debuffs and a 25% strengthen buff on this champion for 1 turn and a continuous heal buff for 2 turns whenever they receive a veil or perfect veil. Once again, just fits in with the rest of his concept of adding veil or perfect veil to himself. And then ally crit rate and Doom Tower by 23%. Nothing too crazy. I think there are better auras out there, especially for Doom Tower. But yeah, overall, I like the champion concept and the abilities in general. I just wish the AI kind of functioned a little bit differently. Now, if you're manualing through waves and stuff like that, in Doom Tower specifically, I think this champion can do very well just because you can lead off with the A2, and then go into the A3 for the AoE decreased defense or weaken, or if you're using Rector Drath or someone like that adds the veil to someone, and then you can just, lead off with Flicker Step for the AoE decreased defense and weaken. Yeah, it'd be great. But yeah, the AI is a little bit wonky. Overall, though, I like this champion a lot. I have heard that he does not have great multipliers, though, so that's kind of a bummer since he is an attack-based champion. And the fact that he is going to take a lot of books. So he has 4 books on the A1, 5 books on the A2, so that's 9 books, and then he has another 5. So 14 legendary books is a lot, to be honest. So that is a big drawback for this champion as well. But overall, I still want this champion just because he looks really cool, and I think I could just have fun with playing with him in certain dungeons and stuff like that. But yeah, if you're looking for a legendary that's going to impact your account a lot, I unfortunately say Roxam is not that legendary, so yeah. Let's go ahead to the next one, which is in the Orc faction of Old Hermit Jorrg, or Jorg. So really cool aesthetic again. They honestly killed it with all these new champions, so hats off to them for that. Has really cool helmet head thing on his back, and then he has the hands on his side, which is really weird. But anyways, on the A1, attack one enemy has a 40% chance at booked of placing HP burn debuff for 2 turns. Really cool ability on the A1. Just having that extra HP burn debuff is really nice. A2, place a 50% increase attack buff on all allies for 2 turns and fills turn meter of all allies by 20%. And you can get this down to a 3-turn cooldown. This heavily reminds me of Seeker, increase attack and increase turn meter. This is on a 3-turn cooldown. I think Seeker might be the same, but he gets that extra turn. So really cool, just utility ability of increase attack and increase turn meter. And then on the A3 has a revive 2 random allies with 60% HP, then fills their turn meter by 40% and places a perfect veil buff on them for 2 turns. And you can drop this down to a 5-turn cooldown. Not the best revive as it's 2 random allies, but obviously if you're not planning on losing everyone in your team, this isn't bad, and it puts the perfect veil to protect them from directly being targeted. Overall, not a crazy amazing champion, but the revive is definitely welcome for the Orc faction, and they have a lot of attack-based champions, so the increased attack is really cool as well. Overall, not the biggest game-changing account type champion. Nice to have maybe for faction wars, like I said, just because of the revive portion. You want to keep everyone alive for those 3-star. But overall, nothing amazing. And then you have King Jarog. So I'm sure that you guys have seen a lot of videos on this guy, but I'll go ahead and go through the kit already. So on the A1, Gigantic Cleaver, attack one enemy 2 times, has a 35% chance of placing a stun debuff for 1 turn. The chance is increased to 50% if the target's turn meter is equal to or below 50%. Nice thing to have CC on a champion on the A1 specifically, so nothing big there. On the A2, hack to bits, attack one enemy 4 times. Each critical hit has a 50% chance of decreasing the cooldown of Gore Maker by 1 turn, which I believe is his A3. You can drop this down to a 3-turn cooldown, which is kind of cool. But yeah, for each critical hit, it's pretty nice, and the 50% chance is actually a decent chance. So and then the A3 Gore Maker, attack all enemies will ignore 20% of each target's defense, will ignore a further 5% of defense for each buff on the target, and you can drop this down to a 5-turn cooldown, but like on the A2 you can drop the cooldown even further possibly. So from what I understand, Gore Maker is his nuking ability and can do very well in, I think, specifically Arena, where you're going to see actually a lot of buffs and stuff like that. And like usually in Arena, you want to strip all the buffs and then attack. On this, you kind of want them to have buffs, maybe get the decreased defense up and then have them have buffs. But overall, not a bad ability to ignore defense, so yeah. And then on the passive, War Machine, increase this champion's speed by 6 and crit damage by 7% for each enemy this champion kills in a round. Stacks up to 30, plus 30 speed and plus 35% crit damage. Stacks will reset if this champion is killed. Whenever an enemy champion is revived, fills this champion turn meter by 30% for each revived enemy, then places a 50% increase attack buff and a 30% increase damage buff on this champion for 1 turn. So the passive, I think, is where a lot of people are criticizing this, just because he never has enough time to stack up everything, right? So you're not going to get the full extent of this passive, which is a big thing. So overall, I don't think this champion is absolutely amazing. I think he's kind of average. I feel like if they're in, I mean, he might get better with time as, you know, more things are added into the game. So he might be one of those people that eventually grows into the game as a really good legendary. But currently right now, he just doesn't have a long enough area in which he can benefit from this passive. I did see that he can nuke in Arena, so that's a very big area that you can place him in like a tag team arena or just your main arena team. Overall, not like a horrible champion. I definitely wouldn't rate him like terrible, but he's gonna have a hard time fitting in the game. I think there are just champions that you can put in your teams that are just gonna have a bigger benefit overall. But that's just my opinion. Overall, though, I want to say he is an awesome looking champion. Like I said, they killed it with the cosmetic and aesthetic portion of all these champions. But yeah, his weapons look amazing, and yeah. But overall, yeah, not worth legendary status as of right now, but can definitely maybe fit there as time goes on. And then the last one we have is an undead horde by the name of Vogoth. So Vogoth is an HP based champion, looks very weird, has a very tiny head, but and is extremely slow. So that is one bad thing. He is amongst one or the slower of champions. But anyways, on the A1, attack one enemy 3 times. Each hit has a 30% chance. You can book that up to 40% chance of increase in duration of 1 random debuff on the target by 1 turn. I wish it was all debuffs, but you know, not everyone can be Vizier, I guess. But the attack 3 times just makes him an automatic candidate for Fire Knight. And then on the A2, attack all enemies, has a 75% chance of booked of placing a provoke debuff on all enemies for 1 turn. Also has a 75% chance of booked of placing a 50% decrease attack debuff for 2 turns on targets who receive the provoke debuff from this skill. So you can't combine him with anyone that has like a provoke in general, just because it needs to be this person's provoke. But overall, a nice CC type of ability. So you're going to try to place provoke. If you successfully place provoke, then you have a chance of placing decreased attack, which lowers the amount of damage they're going to do to Vogoth, which is kind of nice. And then the passive. So passive, Festering Dynamo. Whenever this champion is attacked, heal all allies by 50% of the damage received. So he does heal himself. Only heals by 25% of the damage received from boss attacks, and then this champion only receives half of the heal that all other allies receive. So because he heals himself, he's only going to receive half of that half of that healing. But he's going to function very similarly to Vogoth, the Fragment Fusion epic from a little bit ago. So that's kind of cool, and the fact that, you know, obviously he's provoking, so he's going to be the attack target, is really nice. And then the other passive, Eerie Presence. When attacked, places a leech debuff on the attacker for 2 turns. If the attacker is under a provoke debuff placed by this champion, also has a percent chance, if you book it, of increasing the cooldowns of a random skill on the attacker by 2 turns. Occurs once per attack. This is actually a pretty cool passive just because you're placing a provoke, so when attacked you're going to place a leech buff, which is just going to place it. You have 100% chance as long as you have the accuracy for it. So you're going to apply leech to anyone that has the provoke pretty much, and that hits him. So overall, a really cool like CC protective type champion. Can probably excel pretty well in things like Ice Golem, or even Fire Knight. Like I said, Fire Knight does the AoE, and so you're going to heal everyone with the passive. Also has a triple hit A1, and is positive affinity, I believe. So, and it will help you through the waves. So I think we'll definitely excel Ice Golem just because of the AoE damage, and Fire Knight because of protection on the waves, because the waves do a decent amount of damage, and Fire Knight will do AoE damage when he does pop his shield back down. And then has an increased ally accuracy in all battles by 40 on the aura. But yeah, overall not a bad champion. I definitely would like to try him out. Like I said, he is kind of slow in the speed department, but overall really cool concept of applying leech, applying provoke, healing everyone from the damage he receives, and increasing random debuffs on the target. And he only has 2 active abilities, so could be a candidate for the reflex set. Nothing game changing on this champion, but could help with progression, I would say. If you're looking for a progression type champion, maybe in Doom Tower, or maybe, like I said, in those specific dungeons, Ice Golem and Fire Knight. But yeah, that is it for the 10 times champions. So overall, yes, a bunch of new champions. Are there a lot of game-changing champions? Not really. A lot of these would be like a nice to have, or maybe if you need things specifically for your Faction Wars teams, I think this is like a good 10 times. But I know a lot of people just got done with using the during the 2 times Ancient, so a lot of people are out of Ancients, and I honestly don't think it's worth using Sacreds, as Sacreds 2 times is next week. So yeah, if you're looking for any of these champions, or if you want to try any of these specific champions, go ahead and summon. But overall, I don't think it's worth the summoning this week, just with, you know, what happened last week, 2 times Ancient and Sacred 2 times being this upcoming week. So yeah, that is my opinion. Like I said, like always, make sure you look at your account and see if it's worth summoning for you. But yeah, that is just my opinion. I hope you guys liked the review, and I will talk to you guys next time. See ya.